In the year 2147, humanity had reached the stars, but not without consequences. The galaxy was vast and teeming with life, some of it friendly, most of it hostile. Among these extraterrestrial beings was an enigmatic species known as the Virathians, a race feared for their cunning intelligence and predatory instincts. At the heart of their society stood Queen Nixura, a towering figure cloaked in shimmering black scales that caught the light like liquid obsidian. Her eyes glowed with an eerie golden hue, and her presence commanded both awe and terror. Nixura wasn't just formidable because of her regal bearing or razor-sharp claws. She possessed a biological weapon far deadlier than any plasma rifle or laser cannon, her saliva. It carried a potent neurotoxin capable of rewriting DNA on contact. Any creature unfortunate enough to be marked by her venom would undergo a horrifying transformation, their bodies twisting into grotesque versions of the Virathian form. What made this ability even more insidious was its psychological effect. Those infected became utterly devoted to Nixura, their minds warped to adore her as if she were their savior rather than their destroyer. The human colony on Epsilon 9 had been thriving until the day Nixura's fleet descended from the heavens like a swarm of locusts. Within hours, chaos erupted as her soldiers swept through the settlement, capturing colonists and dragging them before their queen. One by one, they fell victim to her toxic kiss, their screams echoing across the barren landscape before fading into eerie silence. By the time Earth's military forces arrived, half the colony had already succumbed to her influence, transformed into loyal servants who now fought alongside the Virathians against their former allies. Among the reinforcements sent to quell the invasion was Captain Theo, a seasoned soldier whose reputation for bravery bordered on recklessness. With his rugged features, piercing blue eyes, and a scar running down his left cheek, a souvenir from a previous alien skirmish, Theo cut an imposing figure. He led a squad of elite fighters, each handpicked for their skill and resourcefulness. There was Dr. Lila Hart, the team's medic and xenobiologist, whose sharp wit often mastered deep compassion, Corporal Jax Rourke, a burly demolitions expert with a penchant for sarcasm, Lieutenant Maya Vega, a sniper with nerves of steel, and Private Finn Adler, the youngest member of the group, whose enthusiasm sometimes outweighed his experience. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Virathian stronghold, rescue any remaining humans, and neutralize the threat posed by Queen Nixura. But none of them could have anticipated what awaited them inside the labyrinthine fortress carved into the planet's jagged cliffs. Nor could they foresee how deeply entangled their fates would become with the alien queen herself. As the team approached the entrance to the Virathian stronghold, the air grew thick with tension. The jagged cliffs loomed overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the sunlight whole. Theo signaled for his team to move forward, their boots crunching softly against the rocky terrain. They moved silently, weapons at the ready, every sense heightened as they prepared for whatever horrors lay ahead. Inside, the fortress was a maze of twisting corridors illuminated by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Strange clicking sounds echoed through the halls, mingling with faint whispers that sent shivers down their spines. "Stay sharp," Theo murmured, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise. "We don't know what we're walking into." They soon found out. As they rounded a corner, they stumbled upon a chamber filled with captives, humans chained to the walls, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. Some were already showing signs of transformation, their skin taking on a sickly gray hue, fingers elongating into claw-like appendages. Dr. Hart gasped, clutching her medical kit tightly. "This is worse than I thought," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a low growl reverberated through the room. From the shadows emerged a group of Virathian drones, their insectoid bodies gleaming under the dim light. Their mandibles clicked menacingly as they advanced, weapons raised. "Take cover," Theo shouted, diving behind a pillar as energy blasts seared the air around them. The battle erupted in a flurry of gunfire and explosions. Corporal Rourke lobbed a grenade into the fray, sending several drones flying backward in a shower of sparks. Lieutenant Vega took aim with her sniper rifle, picking off enemies with precision shots that left gaping holes in their exoskeletons. Meanwhile, Private Adler scrambled to free the prisoners, his hands shaking as he worked the locks. "Hurry up, kid," Rourke barked, narrowly dodging a blast that scorched the wall beside him. Amid the chaos, Theo spotted something, or someone, that froze him in his tracks. Standing atop a raised platform at the far end of the chamber was Queen Nixura herself. She watched the carnage unfold with an expression of detached amusement, her golden eyes glinting like molten metal. Her lips curled into a cruel smile as she extended a clawed hand toward one of the freed prisoners. Before anyone could intervene, she lunged forward with terrifying speed, her jaws snapping shut around the man's neck. Theo felt a surge of rage unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Without thinking, he charged toward the queen, firing his weapon wildly. "Get away from him!" he roared, his voice raw with fury. Nixura turned her gaze upon him, her smile widening as though amused by his audacity. With a flick of her wrist, she sent the dying prisoner sprawling to the ground, his body convulsing as the toxin began its grim work. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Theo locked eyes with Nixura, and something passed between them, an unspoken challenge, a spark of recognition. Then, with a fluid motion, she leapt down from the platform, landing gracefully amidst the fray. Her movements were hypnotic, almost serpentine, as she weaved through the battlefield, evading bullets and striking with lethal precision. When she finally reached Theo, she paused, tilting her head as if studying him. "You fight well, little human," she purred, her voice a melodic blend of menace and allure. "But you cannot win." Before he could react, she struck, her claws grazing his arm. Pain exploded through his body, followed by a strange warmth that spread rapidly through his veins. His vision blurred, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw admiration, or perhaps hunger, in her glowing eyes. "Captain!" Dr. Hart's frantic cry snapped him back to reality. He staggered backward, clutching his wounded arm as his team rallied around him. "We need to get out of here now," she urged, dragging him toward the exit. Reluctantly, Theo allowed himself to be pulled away, but not before casting one last glance at Nixura. She stood where he'd left her, watching him with an unreadable expression. Something about her lingered in his mind, a nagging pull he couldn't quite shake. Back at their makeshift base, the team tended to Theo's injury while Dr. Hart analyzed the venom coursing through his system. "It's mutating your cells," she explained grimly, holding up a vial of his blood. "If we don't find an antidote soon," she trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. Theo clenched his fists, trying to ignore the creeping sensation beneath his skin. He should have been furious, terrified even, but instead, all he could think about was Nixura. Her voice echoed in his mind, soft and seductive, whispering promises he couldn't fully understand. "We'll stop her," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Yet deep down, a part of him wondered if stopping her was truly what he wanted. Days passed, and Theo's condition worsened. The venom coursed through his veins like wildfire, altering his very essence. His once steady hands trembled uncontrollably, and his reflection in the mirror revealed subtle changes. His pupils dilating unnaturally, his teeth sharpening ever so slightly. But it wasn't just physical. The queen's poison had seeped into his mind, weaving dreams of her touch, her voice, her intoxicating presence. At night, when the others slept, Theo would lie awake, haunted by visions of Nixura. In these dreams, she wasn't the monstrous ruler hell-bent on domination but a figure of ethereal beauty, her golden eyes brimming with longing. She beckoned him closer, her claws tracing delicate patterns along his skin. "Come to me," she whispered, her words dripping with honeyed allure. "You belong with me." Each dream ended the same way, with Theo reaching for her, only to wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding. By day, he tried to focus on the mission, but his thoughts betrayed him. During strategy meetings, his gaze would drift to maps of the Virathian stronghold, imagining the path that led back to her throne room. When Dr. Hart presented updates on potential antidotes, he found himself tuning out, distracted by fantasies of standing beside Nixura, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. Even during combat drills, his movements lacked their usual precision, as though his body yearned to be elsewhere. His teammates noticed, of course. Maya shot him concerned glances whenever he faltered during training exercises, while Jax's sarcastic remarks grew sharper, masking his unease. "You okay there, Cap?" he asked one evening, after Theo nearly dropped his rifle during target practice. "You've been acting like you've got space fever or something." "I'm fine," Theo snapped, though his tone lacked conviction. He avoided meeting their eyes, ashamed of the turmoil raging within him. How could he explain that every fiber of his being felt torn between duty and desire? That the woman responsible for countless atrocities had somehow ensnared his soul? Dr. Hart confronted him later that night, her expression soft yet stern. "Theo, this isn't just about the venom anymore," she said quietly, sitting beside him in the dimly lit infirmary. "She's manipulating you, mind, body, and spirit. If we don't act quickly, you won't just turn into one of them. You'll lose yourself completely." Her words hit home, but they did little to quell the storm inside him. Part of him knew she was right, that Nixura represented everything he was supposed to fight against. Yet another part, a darker, more primal part, whispered that maybe she wasn't the enemy. Maybe she was offering him something greater than humanity could ever provide: power, purpose, belonging. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted it. The next morning, Theo made his decision. Under the pretense of scouting the perimeter, he slipped away from the base, leaving behind a hastily scribbled note promising he'd return. His footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet dawn as he navigated the treacherous terrain leading back to the Virathian stronghold. Every step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by guilt and anticipation. When he finally reached the fortress, he hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. The familiar scent of damp stone and alien musk greeted him, stirring memories of his earlier encounter with Nixura. This time, however, he didn't hesitate. He moved with purpose, his altered senses guiding him deeper into the labyrinthine structure. Guards patrolled the halls, but they paid him no mind, as if they recognized him as one of their own. He found her in the throne room, perched elegantly atop her obsidian seat. Her golden eyes lit up as she spotted him, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "You came back," she purred, rising to meet him. "I knew you would." "I don't know why I'm here," Theo admitted, his voice hoarse. "I should hate you. I should want to kill you. But you don't." She circled him slowly, her claws trailing lightly along his arms. "Because deep down, you know the truth. Humanity fears what it doesn't understand. They call me a monster, but I offer salvation, a new beginning for those willing to embrace it." "And what do you offer me?" Theo asked, his breath hitching as her touch sent shivers down his spine. "You already feel it, don't you?" she whispered, leaning close enough for him to feel her warm breath. "The strength, the clarity, the freedom from doubt. Stay with me, Theo. Together, we can rule this galaxy." For a moment, he believed her. For a moment, he wanted nothing more than to kneel at her feet and pledge his loyalty. But then, faint voices broke through the haze clouding his mind, his friends, calling his name. Reality crashed back down, and with it came a pang of shame so sharp it nearly brought him to his knees. "No," he rasped, pulling away from her grasp. "I won't let you control me." Nixura's smile faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. "You think you can resist?" she hissed, her claws extending menacingly. "You're mine now, Theo. Whether you accept it or not." Before she could strike, alarms blared throughout the fortress. The sound jolted Theo into action, and he bolted for the exit, knowing his team had come for him, and possibly their last chance to save him. The breach was swift and chaotic. Led by Maya's pinpoint accuracy, the team stormed the Virathian stronghold, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through the alien defenders. Jax hurled explosives with reckless abandon, creating openings in walls that had once seemed impenetrable. Behind them, Dr. Hart clutched a small vial containing the experimental antidote, her face pale but determined. They found Theo just as he emerged from the throne room, his body racked with tremors. "Cap!" Jax shouted, grabbing him by the arm to steady him. "What the hell were you thinking?" I don't know," Theo stammered, his voice strained. She almost had me. No time for that now." Maya barked, gesturing toward the advancing horde of Virathian drones. "Move." The retreat was a blur of adrenaline and desperation. The team fought their way back through the fortress, each step bringing them closer to safety, and farther from Nixura's grasp. But the queen wasn't about to let her prize slip away so easily. With a deafening roar, she appeared at the head of her forces, her golden eyes blazing with fury. "You cannot escape me," she snarled, launching herself at Theo with terrifying speed. Maya reacted instantly, firing a tranquilizer dart laced with the antidote directly at Nixura. The projectile struck true, embedding itself in the queen's neck. For a moment, she staggered, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Then, with a guttural scream, she collapsed to the ground, her massive form shaking violently as the serum took hold. Seizing the opportunity, the team sprinted for the exit, dragging Theo along with them. Behind them, the fortress began to collapse, its structural integrity compromised by Jax's earlier detonations. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, forcing them to dodge and weave as they made their escape. Finally, they burst into the open air, the harsh sunlight momentarily blinding after the dim confines of the stronghold. Gasping for breath, they regrouped near their transport ship, its engines already roaring to life. Dr. Hart wasted no time administering the antidote to Theo, injecting it directly into his bloodstream. He winced but didn't protest, his gaze fixed on the crumbling fortress in the distance. As the ship lifted off, Theo felt the first stirrings of relief. The venom's grip on his body began to loosen, its influence retreating like a tide. Yet even as the physical effects subsided, the emotional scars remained. He closed his eyes, haunted by the memory of Nixura's final words. "You are mine, Theo. No matter where you go, you will always belong to me." And deep down, he feared she might be right. As the transport ship hurtled through the atmosphere, Theo sat slumped in his seat, his body trembling as the antidote waged war against Nixura's venom. Dr. Hart monitored his vitals with a furrowed brow, her fingers flying over a tablet as she adjusted dosages and analyzed data. The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances, their relief at escaping tempered by the uncertainty of whether they had truly saved their captain, or merely delayed the inevitable. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared as Lieutenant Maya scrambled to stabilize their trajectory. "What the hell was that?" Jax barked, gripping the edge of his seat. Before anyone could answer, the cockpit window revealed the source of the disturbance. A massive Virathian cruiser descending from orbit, its sleek black hull bristling with weapons. It loomed over them like a predator closing in on its prey. "They're hailing us," Maya announced grimly, her voice tight with tension. On the screen flickered the image of Queen Nixura herself, though she looked different now. Her once pristine scales were marred by cracks, her golden eyes dimmed but still burning with determination. Her voice crackled through the comms, cold and commanding. "You cannot undo what has been done," she declared, her gaze locking onto Theo. "The toxin runs deeper than your science can comprehend. Even now, it reshapes him." Theo's breath hitched as pain surged through his chest, confirming her words. He clenched his fists, fighting to stay conscious. "Ignore her," Dr. Hart snapped, injecting another dose of the antidote into his arm. "We're not losing you, Theo." Nixura smirked, leaning closer to the camera. "You think this is over? My children are already among your kind, spreading my legacy across the stars. And you?" She paused, her piercing gaze softening ever so slightly. "You will return to me, Theo. Whether by choice or necessity, our fates are intertwined." With that, the transmission cut off, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. The cruiser fired a warning shot, forcing Maya to divert all power to the engines. They narrowly avoided destruction, but it was clear they couldn't outrun the enemy for long. Back at the human base, the team worked tirelessly to stabilize Theo while grappling with the implications of Nixura's threat. Dr. Hart pored over samples of his blood, her frustration mounting as she discovered traces of the venom still active despite the antidote. "It's adapting," she muttered, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "The toxin is evolving faster than we can counteract it." Meanwhile, Theo wrestled with his own inner turmoil. The physical symptoms had subsided somewhat, but the psychological effects lingered like a shadow he couldn't shake. Images of Nixura haunted his waking moments, her voice whispering promises of power and belonging. At night, he dreamed of her throne room, where she awaited him with open arms, and claws ready to strike. Desperate for answers, the team turned to their most unlikely ally, one of the partially transformed colonists rescued during their initial raid. His name was Elias, though only fragments of his humanity remained. His elongated fingers twitched as he spoke, his voice strained but coherent. She doesn't just infect you, he rasped, his glowing eyes darting nervously. She connects to you, feels what you feel, knows what you want before you do. Are you saying she's inside his head? Jax asked incredulously, gesturing toward Theo, who sat silently in the corner, staring at nothing. Elias nodded slowly. Not just his head. His soul. Once she marks you, she owns a piece of you forever. He shuddered, clutching his temples as if trying to block out memories of his own transformation. But there might be a way to sever the link, to break her hold completely. Dr. Hart leaned forward, her curiosity outweighing her skepticism. How? There's a ritual, Elias murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. An ancient practice used by her kind to cleanse those tainted by their touch. But it requires something rare, a crystal found only in the heart of a dying star. A dying star? Private Adler echoed, his youthful enthusiasm momentarily overshadowed by disbelief. That's impossible. Not impossible, Maya corrected, pulling up a holographic map of nearby systems. Just insanely dangerous. There's a collapsing star in the Viridian sector. If we move fast enough, we might be able to extract the crystal before it implodes. Theo finally stirred, his blue eyes meeting theirs with a mixture of resolve and resignation. Then that's what we'll do, he said firmly, though his voice betrayed the weight of his decision. I won't let her win. The journey to the Viridian sector was fraught with peril. The collapsing star emitted bursts of radiation that fried their ship's shields and wreaked havoc on their systems. Corporal Rourke cursed under his breath as he patched together the damaged engine, while Maya navigated asteroid fields littered with debris from the dying celestial body. Through it all, Theo remained eerily calm, as though the proximity to oblivion dulled the chaos within him. When they finally reached the heart of the star, they discovered the crystal embedded in a floating shard of molten rock. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, pulsating like a heartbeat. Retrieving it would require a spacewalk, a task made exponentially more hazardous by the intense gravitational pull of the collapsing star. I'll go, Theo volunteered without hesitation. No one argued. They knew better than to try stopping him. Clad in a reinforced suit, Theo stepped out into the void, tethered to the ship by a thin cable. As he approached the crystal, he felt a strange resonance, an echo of Nixura's presence tugging at the edges of his mind. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure whether he sought salvation or surrender. Then, with a deep breath, he reached out and grasped the crystal. The instant his fingers closed around it, a searing pain shot through his body, accompanied by a vision so vivid it nearly overwhelmed him. He saw Nixura, not as a conqueror, but as a lonely being burdened by centuries of survival and loss. Her golden eyes pleaded with him, not for dominance, but for understanding. And then, just as suddenly, the vision faded, replaced by the sound of his teammates' voices calling him back to the ship. Clutching the crystal tightly, Theo allowed himself to be pulled away from the abyss. Back aboard the vessel, Dr. Hart wasted no time preparing the ritual. Under Elias's guidance, she constructed a makeshift altar using the crystal as its centerpiece. Theo knelt before it, his face pale but determined. As the others chanted the ancient incantations provided by Elias, the crystal began to glow brighter, its light enveloping Theo in a warm, radiant embrace. For a fleeting moment, he felt free, untethered from the poison that had bound him. But as the ritual neared its climax, a sudden shockwave rippled through the ship. On the monitors, they saw it. Nixura's cruiser, having tracked them across the galaxy, emerging from hyperspace with weapons primed. She's here, Maya whispered, her voice laced with dread. To their horror, the Queen's voice echoed through the ship, not via comms, but directly in their minds. You cannot escape fate, Theo, she intoned, her tone both menacing and mournful. Even now, I offer you a choice. Join me willingly, or watch everything you love burn. Theo rose to his feet, the crystal still clutched in his hand. His gaze hardened as he turned to face the viewport, where Nixura's ship loomed like a harbinger of doom. No, he said softly, yet with unshakable conviction. This ends now. With that, he stepped forward, ready to confront the Queen one final time. For humanity, for his friends, and for himself. Theo stood at the viewport, his silhouette illuminated by the ominous glow of Nixura's cruiser. The ship's weapons charged with a low hum, casting an eerie light across the faces of his teammates. Each of them knew what was at stake, not just Theo's life, but the future of humanity itself. Yet despite the overwhelming odds, there was no hesitation in Theo's eyes, only resolve. "You've got this, Cap," Jack said gruffly, gripping his rifle tightly. "We'll hold the line." Dr. Hart stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear etched into her features. "The ritual isn't complete yet. If you go out there now, she could still claim you." "I know," Theo replied without looking away from the approaching threat. He turned the crystal over in his hand, its pulsating light growing brighter as if responding to his determination. "But I can't let her destroy everything we've fought for. This ends here, and it ends by choice." Before anyone could protest further, he activated the airlock and stepped outside, tethered only by his courage and conviction. The void of space stretched endlessly around him, cold and indifferent, but Theo felt none of its chill. His focus was singular: Nixura. As he drifted toward her cruiser, the massive vessel opened a portal, pulling him inside with magnetic force. When the doors sealed behind him, he found himself standing in a cavernous chamber bathed in dim, flickering light. At its center stood Queen Nixura, her obsidian scales gleaming faintly, her golden eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You came back," she said softly, almost tenderly, as though she had expected nothing less. Her claws clicked against the floor as she approached, each step deliberate and measured. "Did my little gift not satisfy you? Or do you seek something more?" Theo tightened his grip on the crystal, feeling its warmth seep into his palm. "I came to end this," he replied evenly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "You've taken enough lives, enough freedom, enough hope. It stops now." Nixura tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "And how do you propose to stop me, little human? With your fragile body and fleeting existence?" She gestured dismissively, her voice dripping with condescension. "Even with that crystal, you are no match for me." "Maybe not," Theo admitted, taking a cautious step forward. "But I'm not alone." At his words, the walls of the chamber began to tremble. From outside, the sounds of battle echoed, the unmistakable roar of energy weapons and explosions signaling that his team had breached the cruiser. Maya's sniper shots pierced through bulkheads, while Jax's grenades tore apart enemy drones. Dr. Hart coordinated their efforts via comms, her voice calm but commanding. Nixura snarled, her claws flexing as she realized her forces were under attack. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "Foolish mortals," she spat, turning her attention back to Theo. "Do you truly believe they can save you?" "They don't need to," Theo countered, raising the crystal high above his head. Its light pulsed stronger now, radiating waves of energy that seemed to push against Nixura's presence. "This isn't about them, it's about me making a choice. And I choose to be free." With that, he slammed the crystal onto the ground, shattering it into 1,000 glittering shards. The resulting explosion of light filled the chamber, blinding and deafening. Nixura screamed, her form writhing as the energy surged through her, disrupting the connection she had forged with Theo, and with countless others. Theo fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the backlash. Visions flooded his mind, memories of those infected by her venom, their minds waking from her thrall as the link between them shattered. He saw colonists regaining their humanity, soldiers breaking free of her control, entire worlds reclaiming their autonomy. And amidst it all, he felt Nixura's anguish, her cries echoing like a dying star. When the light finally faded, Theo blinked away the spots clouding his vision. Before him lay Nixura, her once majestic form reduced to a frail shadow of its former self. Her scales were dull and cracked, her golden eyes dimmed to a pale yellow. She reached out weakly toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "Why? Why would you deny us both?" "Because you gave me no other choice," Theo answered, his voice heavy with sorrow. He knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You wanted to rule through fear and domination. But true power comes from unity, not enslavement." For a moment, Nixura looked as though she might lash out one final time. Instead, she closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her scaled cheek. Perhaps you are right," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Perhaps even queens must learn when to let go." Her body dissolved into motes of light, scattering into the void like stardust. As the last remnants of her presence faded, the cruiser began to collapse, its systems failing without her will to sustain them. Alarms blared, urging evacuation, but Theo lingered a moment longer, staring at the empty space where she had been. Back aboard their own ship, the team worked frantically to escape the destruction. They cheered when Theo reappeared through the airlock, battered but alive, clutching a fragment of the crystal as proof of what they had accomplished. Together, they piloted the vessel clear of the wreckage, watching as Nixura's cruiser imploded in a brilliant burst of light. In the days that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The toxin's influence waned, freeing those who had been transformed or controlled. Colonies rebuilt, alliances strengthened, and humanity reclaimed its place among the stars. Theo became a symbol of resilience, a man who had faced temptation and emerged victorious, not through hatred, but through understanding. Yet even as he stood on the bridge of their ship, gazing out at the endless expanse of space, Theo couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. Nixura had been a monster, yes, but also a being capable of pain, regret, and longing. In the end, she had taught him something profound, that even the darkest hearts yearn for redemption. As the ship sailed onward, Theo allowed himself a small smile. The scars of his journey would remain, but so too would the lessons learned, and the knowledge that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the brightest futures.